Hello, dear Sherilyn Ifill and Rachel Maddow and MSNBC. Distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. The other national / international and intercity / interstates. News media, locations, wherein our victim-predator roles for where and how Miss Ifill has to do what she said was unjoyful, which is the defense of the bodies of correlation nature, who can discern where and how the human volume science was and is being and having been abridged, and where that is being valued. Simultaneously, roles increasingly having valued. The causes of it blamed on other things, others, and or on selves. So thank God, everywhere we have them using sides, partisanship, non-partisanship, politics, we have physical delusions that are juxtaposed with criminally foreign influence premises treatments with remote uses of that and the same thing in the other countries. So forgiveness is not to give up. Excuse me. It's also to counter those who are saying have no forgiveness because they are in collusion with where and how all identity ground locations are being and having been used. When they have offensively defenses of the identities of the agencies and of the quote experts unquote, as male and female know. They already had that employed originally and still by a breaching method. If one can't explain and or discern where and how a breaching method, a human fact, cheap in nature, enslavement system, a slavery system against everyone at all locations, areas, and states, entertaining what you can't entertain, without blaming the causes of it on other things other than ourselves. Or you have to blame it properly. That causes you to be a quality of facts, premises treatments, time treatments, sequence treatments, positive negative treatments, identity treatments that were criminalized off the record. But they were maintained manifest on the record. A breaching method new through other motivations, natures, needs, interests, roles. Everyone, all roles, sickly, distinctly enslaved. Specifically for everyone to cause, not just to blame other things, others, and or ourselves. For all the ways nature would and does increasingly demonstrate that. Systems tactical ulterior from its that shows us what's going to cause positive or negative value nature progressions individually grouped in together, simultaneously / hyper-simultaneously. And or it's going to demonstrate exceptions, accepts nature, and demonstration of the same thing. For space, nature, and transfer. Leaf of Hades, more probably what it means. Now, what is evidential / hyper-evidential can be used to discern this. So just like manifest as values, the sine, cosine, and tangent, relative to what is hyper-simultaneous. And then while as what is simultaneous, where it is directionally oriented, and 90 degrees, it is angles oriented. It is specific type of angle. It is a specific identity of conjunction to what is temporary, no, and what is forever, simultaneous, still though. What is hyper-simultaneous, for example, as what they are being simultaneously, where and how we are individual volume, grouped, and species individual. The group inherent individual, positive or negative, relative. Everyone does, relative to the hyperscience is identity of relationship to itself. But we increasingly have had self-valued, where and how positions with all identity of the ground locations, voices, names, titles, locations, voices too. So, for example, bigger than, greater than, and more finite than, the answer /s for what? Sine, cosine, and tangent are value /value progressions with and as. What they are really identity of volumes with and as. So, and like, for example, computers, what they are really identity of value /value progressions as. And this is relative to where and how. So, actually, honest science reveals that one identity of volume, its identity of relationship to it, and the value of that are three volumes that are bound the same way cell nucleus, cell body with cell walls are bound. The same way individual, grouped, species, body are bound. And that being relevant to where and how we are value, and that being tied to our syntax nature. No. And so this is, now we have had entertained roles of as identity of the ground, location, opinions / convictions that have entertained premises treatments, defenses of premises treatments relative to the real causes of negative value nature, progressions, action natures that were also sustained, where and how it was true. Those roles were sickly, distinctly against our own body, the species volume science. We don't have to even agree about the species volume. We have to agree that the sciences share an identity. What is hyper-simultaneous? That's it. What's actually simultaneously true always? What's actually the value of sequence, premises, exceptions, exception nature? See, that's where and how we have the order of the finite and the smallest details relevant here. The ancients revealed that there's a difference between, there are proofs that the ancients had discerned and valued the difference between, knowing and understanding the value of the difference between pantheism and hyper-pantheism. There are proofs then that pantheism became a self-valued, criminally re-engineered manifestation of that relevant to where and how we are manifest, by and with the extent of what was revealed before the sciences became criminally re-engineered as a quality of fact treatment nature, time treatment nature, as a method /s that actually has means to discern one identity that can lead. But its answer /s can only be interpreted if we're being honest with the simultaneous and with the hyper-simultaneous. So with correlation, it works that, for example, greater than and more finite than, and while being true as the definitions of why and how, sine, cosine, and tangent are relative. For example, as identity of the grounds, or as identity of directions, hyper-relativity to that which is only increasing everywhere at once. And all exceptions in exception nature are in demonstration of the same thing. To be in demonstration simultaneously of what exception and exception nature is about. So, which is again where there are three natures as value. And in other words, and this is using the invisible but still discernible. such as the predicate and the subject. Note how if you take a predicate and you put ing on it, it loses its identity. Or not, doesn't lose its identity. It changes its identity of relationship to itself and the value of that. It is differentially constantly the increasing possession of and as a semi-nature relationship to which keeps each identity of volume its own and wanting and needing to go by its system. Other systems per recorded actually a method, a breaching method. Exceptions in exception nature were made. Employments were made that would be entertained syntactically. Why is this person doing this job? Entertaining slavery. Entertaining, blaming out other things other than ourselves. The reason slavery stayed even after the revolution was to be, the ancients would know the difference, would know the value of understanding why and how. We have to discern how there is war, there is revolution, and there is hyper-revolution, which is, there is peace, but there are criminal insidiousness natures of peace. And because, for example, that has never been addressed. Otherwise, we would have overcome that. The human identity of volume longs to have what we could have had. Instead of having fights where all technology and sophistication goes into making wars and bombs that either can destroy us being used, or that, you know what I mean? Even if, only thing that wins is what keeps identities to the ground, identity of relationship to itself, its system, perfect, value progression. See, the perfect, more and more hyper-perfect is being made through where and how the perfect world can make more of itself. So we have to use what is actually sequence true, for example. So, also Senator Warren. So, for example, New Britain Superior Court has a number of Facebook accounts, and they have the motivations for when they made them. They have the motivations for people when they respond to what they opine and or convict that which trials were about. So now, for example, when we put as a suffix before any word, phrase, or sentence, or body of correlation on the word hyper, and or when we put the suffix nature after it, we can get, there's an additional method, there's an additional quality of fact keeping nature that forces counter-entertained and entertained and admitted where and how exceptions and exception nature and exploitation, and like, for example, uses of all identity of the ground locations. It is, you yourself admitted, Senator Warren, that it is not right to have bodies in jails because all they did was smoke a plant that nature had. See, a breaching method put laws that force roles with things like slavery, and it measured and maintained people blaming other things, others and or on themselves, and it sustained that so correlation nature would be shown. Means it needs to demonstrate how it sustained it. By demonstrating only means to demonstrate it through our own, through showing what was actually recorded simultaneously / hyper-simultaneously. This being relevant now, not just to what is naturally hyper-simultaneous, but that which was criminally engineered to be self-valued, mimic of that, and guide to the 5 identities of hyper-criminal insidiousness as a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. I'm not a lawyer, not police, I'm not criminal, not a judge, not a lawyer. They are originally still recorded victim predators / hyper predators. Politicians, no disrespect. Senator Warren, the democracy, all those the voting, all those locations there, in states are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed how maintained. Differentially criminally foreign influenced, and how and why that is exploited at all locations where distinct identities of roles with what can't be entertained needs to pretend other relative to be needs to pretend integrity. This measured with our, in other words, our founders had to tell us to defend the surface concept of the Constitution. They had to know, they had to hide the real roles with it. Otherwise, they would have been sought out by the breaching method that had complete possession of all the modern countries, individually grouped and together, entertaining what you can't entertain, and defend yourself as those countries from what had and has complete possession over the syntax nature, therefore over the function nature, and worse, of all locations, areas, states, further into sciences, simultaneously further private database relationships, simultaneously further on off where everyone lives in the spots next to it. This is again where we are manifest as syntax nature, as names treatments, as a value progression. One of the things it is always is an identity theft / fraud method. Now, what is hyper-evidential is also recorded, so capable of being revealed by this way, by valuing the identity of the grounds, actual identity of conjunction, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously is the same volume as life, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously is the types of life. For example, where and how the hyper-simultaneous demonstrates how it is distinct from all other identities of simultaneous nature, individually grouped and together. And this has a ties to our syntax nature and to our needs to use words like value naturally and not have to debate with people saying that something is natural that is not natural. In other words, and using the methods of getting away with it needs in physical delusions where they say, oh, if it wasn't natural, it wouldn't be. So that's where we need to say, well, that's criminal insidiousness, natures of positive and negative treatment simultaneously, and self-valued, and that being and having been recorded, used remotely, effectively, originally,